Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. And I'm excited to bring some
Okay.
photography tips to you via Noel, who's been photographing for many years. We won't get into numbers on the years. I think it's just important to share some tips. Cell phone photography has really become so big, and I truly believe that you've got something really powerful right in your hand. So welcome, Noel. Thanks for coming on today.
Hi, April, and hi, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great day.
Yeah. So you are photographing with an iPhone, correct?
Yes, well, I shoot both film and digital, but it's been said that the best camera that you have is the one in your hand, so to speak. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but a lot of people have their phones. And what I've been doing lately is I have used the phone as a composition tool primarily. So, for instance, if I was out photographing, whether I am packing film or shooting digital, the way I approach my photography now is very intentional. So I would look at a scene and see if there's a composition in there that moves me or that I
Hmm.
like. And then, in order to help me imagine it, I would take a picture of it on my phone,
Nice.
and then I would look at it and decide if I want to take a real picture of it. And if I do, then I use the big camera.
Right, right.
But I think the phone is an excellent way to visualize something, especially if you're shooting film, because you can't really see what it's going to look like.
Right. So what are some features on the iPhone that you really like to use or that are helpful for you to visualize and
The iPhone, just like a digital camera, if you look at the settings, it will show you different aspect ratios. For example, if I was shooting with a DSLR, usually those have a 2:3 aspect ratio. Or let's say if I was shooting 35 millimeter film, then that's also a 2:3 aspect ratio. So I would adjust the aspect ratio of the camera phone. You can do that on the camera settings. The other thing that I like to use is an app called Viewfinder,
hmm.
or in some phones they call them Director's Viewfinder. I think the app called Director's Viewfinder is the professional version.
Okay.
And basically, what the Viewfinder app has is a set of different aspect ratios and different camera lenses, so that you could use different combinations of both. Like, for example, if you're familiar with a camera called the Hasselblad X-Pan, that is a panoramic film camera that shoots in a 1 by 2.7 aspect ratio. I
Right.
know that that's kind of odd, and maybe we're going a little technical here, but the Hasselblad X-Pan is a film camera. So when you're shooting with it, sure, you've got the rangefinder, you can frame your photo, but you don't really know quite how it's going to look like. And
No,
this is
right.
where the app is going to be helpful to you, because you can call in the aspect ratio of this particular camera, the Hasselblad X-Pan, and then together with that, you can also set in the particular lens millimeter setting that you need. So for example, if I had the 45 millimeter lens on the Hasselblad X-Pan, then I would set the aspect ratio in the app, and then I would also set the lens that I'm using.
Right.
So when you combine both and you look at it, then that's it. That's how you imagine your composition. It
Yeah.
gives you the instant gratification of shooting with a digital camera. So now if you take a shot of that, then you can ask yourself, do I like this? Is this something, worthwhile for me? And if you do, then you can actually now use the real camera to take the photo.
Right. Right.
And you can do all the adjustments you need to do along with that.
Right. Yeah,
And
that's
I actually use the same method, even if I was shooting digital. And also, the neat thing about it is if you took a shot of it with your phone, then you have
Yeah.
you have a phone, you have a photo of it on your phone that you can share on social media if you like,
Right.
you know. So
Yeah.
that app has been very useful. It's called Viewfinder. You can go to the App Store. I don't know if Android has it in their what do you call it? Play Store, I think is what they
It's
call it.
yeah, they call it Play Store. I haven't
The
actually looked for it.
Yeah, so I'm sure they have a version of it for Android, but for iOS or iPhones, they're called Viewfinder. Yep.
No, that's a very handy tool. Are there other applications? Are there times creatively that you'll just go out and just use your cell phone?
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Yeah, I said, are there times that you actually just go out for the day with just your cell phone?
I lost you. Sorry.
Oh, are there days or times that you just go out with your cell phone and only photograph with your cell phone?
Because I take pictures all the time, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that happens, because sometimes I just take a walk and then all I have with me is the phone. But see, we have to, I need to make a distinction here with regards to shooting on the phone and shooting with, a camera, a real
Right.
camera. The phone's camera is a real camera, but I'm just saying shooting with the phone versus shooting with a DSLR or a film camera. So I want to make a distinction between the two. Nowadays, if you shoot with your iPhone or Android, if you're shooting on regular light, okay, let's say it's 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
or let's say 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're shooting in ideal lighting conditions at that time, you really are not going to see a lot of difference between shooting with your iPhone or shooting with a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, for example.
Right.
Because um, under those lighting conditions, whether you take a photo with a phone or a camera, they're both going to look great.
Yes.
And phones are very good actually at getting the optimal exposure, because I believe the phone companies, the people that use these cameras in conjunction with the apps in the phone, use a lot of out of the box thinking in order to achieve results that I believe a lot of these camera manufacturers don't do. So, for example, if I was shooting a highly contrasted scene and I was shooting it with the iPhone, and then if I took a picture of it with a regular camera, more than likely your iPhone shot is going to look better.
Yeah, I
I
know.
mean, that happens to me a lot. It's so funny. And then when I share it, I would often comment like, "Why do I even need to, or why do I even bother?" Right?
Right, right.
Because if I was shooting with a regular camera, then I would need to protect the highlights, so I would have to use a filter, blah blah blah, and then I would have to take the exposure on the shadows, and I don't even need to do any of that with a phone.
Yeah.
The phone automatically takes all of those situations and does it for you.
Yeah, I know.
So,
It's almost
however,
frightening.
however, again, I have to make this distinction. If all you want to do is share it on social media, then really, there's nothing wrong with shooting with just a phone. The problem happens is, let's say down the road, for whatever reason, you need to make a print or would like to make a print. Now, if you're going to make a print that's like 8 inches by 10 or 12, for example, I think your phone resolution would just be fine, even if it's like 12 megapixels, which is a lot of phones, you know, um, the more recent ones, their front cameras have 12 megapixels, and that's more than enough for an
Right.
8 by 10 or an 8 by 12 print, as long as you don't crop.
Right.
Because, or let's say you shot something and you zoomed in, like you're taking a picture with a phone, and you can zoom in by like working with your fingers and zooming the shot in. If you do that, you will lose resolution.
Yeah.
And when you print it, even as an 8 inches by 10 or 8 inches by 12, you will see what you lost. The detail is not going to be the same.
Right.
If you don't crop it, then it'll be fine.
Right.
So under those circumstances, the really small sensor of a phone is just really going to be obvious. The lack of detail, the dynamic range, those things, they're just going to be obvious. Those limitations. The other
Yeah.
one way to offset that is depending on another app, and I'll talk about another app. If you use Lightroom, the Lightroom camera app will allow you to shoot a raw DNG file, and that's a raw file.
Oh, with your phone.
And that's helpful because yeah, but you'll have to shoot using the Lightroom app. So, for example, I can't use the Viewfinder app
Right.
to shoot a raw file because that app doesn't allow you to shoot a raw file.
Right.
But then that's okay because I mainly just use what I shot with the Viewfinder app for reference. And an occasional posting, if it happens to turn out really nice, I would share it, because it's like a simulation of what I want to do with the real camera.
Right.
So sometimes I would share it. Yeah. But if you want to shoot something that has higher quality, okay, that's a totally different purpose. If you shot primarily with a camera phone, iOS or Android, then having the Lightroom app helps you because it allows you to shoot in a DNG raw file. And that means that all the sensor data that's captured by the phone sensor would be intact and available to use for post-processing.
Right.
Because whatever you see on your phone screen after you snap a photo, it's like what you see on your mirrorless camera or DSLR when you click the shutter and then the image pops out and you take a look at it. That's actually a processed image. It was processed by the camera
Right.
or processed by the phone. And more often than not, they're always JPEGs.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
they're 8-bit JPEGs, and they're processed files. Now, if they're good enough for you, then there's certainly nothing wrong with them. But if you wanted a higher quality, then you would do what most photographers do when they shoot with their cameras. They would shoot raw and process the image later with some app like Lightroom, Photoshop, or Capture One, or whatever it is that you use
Right.
to process your images.
Right.
Now, shooting the DNG file on the Lightroom app will give you a file that's more, how do I say this, more workable.
Right.
So your highlights, you'll be able to manipulate better your highlights, your shadow areas. Probably you'd be able to recover more than you would with just the JPEGs. And you would be able to do it in a way that would probably be less noisy than if it was a lower bit file, because JPEGs are 8-bit files and raw files are, they're higher quality.
Right. They're higher
Not
quality.
to be technical yet.
Right.
So that's one way to work around the quality issues of using the phone and getting a print done. Certainly, if you process your DNG raw file from Lightroom's camera app, you would have a file that's more workable, and in the end, you would get a higher quality output for printing
Right.
versus just the regular JPEG from the camera.
Right.
So it really all depends what you want to do with an image. I believe if a person really got into this, if a person got serious about photography, whether it's just a hobby or whatever, at some point, they're going to make a transition, even if it doesn't happen a lot, somehow, somewhere, they're going to make the transition into something more creative, like printing,
Yes.
or they want to frame their photos,
Yes. Right.
something like that, and when that happens, then you're going to see the limitation of using just the phone and using a real camera
Yeah.
once you get serious with it.
Right.
And then at that point, you're going to think, oh, how I wish I shot everything with.
Yeah, exactly. Then you'll go back to those beautiful cell phone pictures.
So,
Exactly.
yep,
And you'll
it's
be
just
like,
one of those things.
and that's what I've learned too, is that the cell phone is excellent at, getting the colors right and the lighting right. So use it as a reference, because then you can grab it with your large camera.
Mhm.
I have,
And that's why I have chosen to use the phone this way, so that my expectations of the photos that I get out of it are very realistic. I'm not going to use it for printing,
no, you
but I don't
can't.
have any problem sharing it on social media. They actually look great.
Yeah, I know, that's just it. They look amazing, and then
Yeah.
it's like sometimes it frustrates you. It forces you to work harder with your DSLR, your mirrorless camera, to get it to perform. Because you're right. I think the phone manufacturers, they've put so much stuff into these cell phones to make these amazing photos, but that's not quite there yet with some of the cameras. They vary so much.
Yeah, the cameras, it's not for anything, but because um they just see, the phone doesn't see the same way that a camera sees. The phone is aided by a lot of really advanced software.
Right. Yeah.
Like for example, what we take for granted with the phones in the past, in order for me, because in like 5 to 10 years back, when digital was still evolving, they're definitely not the way it is now. There was a technique called high dynamic range (HDR)
Right.
photography, where photographers would take several shots, at least 3 to 5 images, and they would take that from the darkest to the lightest, and then they would use a special software to combine all 5 of them in
Yes.
order to get a high dynamic image. And the idea there is, it looks kind of like what you see with your eyes, okay? Because our eyes are incredible cameras. They're never, unless, of course, people wear glasses, and eyesights can be affected, or people with eye problems will have a different way of seeing from normal people. But eyes are incredible cameras. They never make a mistake, and what they see is reality. you
Right.
know and cameras, they're not exactly like that. They have a lot of limitations. So these are workarounds to try and get it to a point that they look more like what we see. The problem with the HDR thing back then is that a lot of people abused it. They got creative with it, quote
Right.
unquote, and a lot of it was just, in my opinion, was really over the top. Now, of course, I'm not criticizing, one person's art versus another, but I think the phone companies refined the HDR process to a point that the phones actually make a more realistic image than a regular camera.
Yeah.
That's why they look so good.
Right. Right.
Because actually, a phone would take several shots.
Right.
They would do the work for you.
Right.
With a camera, you'd have to do it yourself. You'd have to set it to shoot 3 to 5 shots. Okay. And some newer cameras, they can combine it, but not to the same degree that the phone can. And part of the reason why the phones can do that is because they have such small sensors.
Right. Exactly.
It doesn't take a lot of processing to shoot many photos and combine them, because the sensor data is minuscule compared to a camera with a larger sensor. Do you
Right.
know how small the iPhone sensors are? The phone sensor are. They're smaller than our fingernail. Like our smallest fingernail here. the phone camera sensor is even smaller than
I
this.
know it's
So it
incredible.
doesn't take a lot of processing power to shoot several photos in succession and combine them into a really neat image. It's not that hard to do on a phone.
Right.
But a camera with a far bigger sensor, I mean,
Yeah, right. The file sizes are so
yeah.
much larger. Exactly.
So I hope all this tech talk isn't boring you, April.
Yeah, no, 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 no. I just want to give our listeners a few more
I
things.
can really geek out about this.
Right, right. Well, it can once you start down the rabbit hole of and even getting into which is something for another episode. As photographers, we start to gravitate. I'm starting to find different types of cameras have different color profiles. So depending
Yeah,
on what type of subject matter or what type of photography I'm going to do often dictates which camera body I'll use.
yeah, yeah. You mentioned color profile. Sorry, I lost you. What did you say about that again?
Oh, I was just saying how as you go down the rabbit hole of photography, once you move past your cell phone and get kind of a real camera, whether that's mirrorless or DSLR, the different camera manufacturers use different camera color profiles, which may
Yeah,
change which route you want to go. So then you can
yeah.
get
You can get really technical about that. For example, once I processed my raw file and I save it, I save them as 16-bit TIFFs. Using ProPhoto RGB as the final image file. I mean, we could get really technical about this,
yeah,
and that's because that's the highest quality you could ever have, and your master file should be like that. At least that's my opinion.
right,
Okay.
right.
Once you shoot a JPEG, if you don't shoot a raw file, if you shoot a JPEG, that's it.
Yeah,
There's no turning back. You can't turn that into a raw file. You can't. Um, you can't have data where it's not there.
right.
Okay. And I found that out years ago because when I first went on my workshop, with Keith, and I had a Nikon D700, and I didn't know any better. And they were set to JPEGs. I just didn't know any
Oh,
better at that time. I wasn't
okay.
into post processing and everything, but I was shooting film style. Like in order to protect the highlights, I used filters to protect the highlights, and I shot it like I would shoot a film camera. So my exposures were good, but the problem is they were all JPEGs.
Right.
And down the road, when I look back at my images, I mean, I actually love the rendering of that sensor, you know? And even up to now, I mean, these are images that I could continually print and show, but I'm limited in what I can do with them because they're really just JPEGs.
Right. Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
So I learned my lesson earlier on.
Right. But for people getting
So
started, I think the cell phone is a great tool. It's a great way to get you immersed. I always encourage people, whether you have an Android or a Apple phone, to play with all the different apps and try different things. Just explore and have fun with it.
yep, just definitely concentrate on your composition. That's what I always tell people, and I know that I need to explain that a little bit more. You and I, we see differently from each other. Every person sees the world
Yes.
in a different way. That's why when you line up 5 photographers and you have them shoot the same thing, you're going to get 5 different images. It's because the way each person sees the world is different, and that's what needs to be developed because only you can see the world that way.
Right.
So use the phone as a compositional tool. You know, um, use it to translate what you see. Another concept or principle that's worth remembering is I believe that as a photographer, even before you take your photo, you've actually already taken it.
Yeah.
You've taken it in your mind. You already imagined what it would look like. that's actually part of what compels you to take the photo.
Right, right, that's true. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
that's what moves you, because you saw this image and you imagined this composition in your head. And in a sense, you already know what your photo looks like. You're
Right,
just executing it with your tools, like a camera or a cell phone for that
right,
matter.
right,
So use the cell phone to express your composition, because they're so easy to do with the phone.
right.
It's so easy to turn something you see into something that's right there. You have instant gratification. And then you
Right.
can decide, do I like this or not? You
Right.
know?
And that's the beauty of it. You can instantly start sharing it,
Yeah.
kind of develop
Yeah. And, and,
what
and
you
which brings me
liked
up to my
or
next point. And as
yeah.
far as my pictures is concerned, I'm not all that, but I have one other thing that I adhere to is I take my serious photos, okay? My serious photos, not the casual photos. I take serious photos of stuff that moves me,
Mm,
because I believe if that if that particular composition or scene moves me, then I have a higher chance of moving someone else with it.
right.
Although that's not primarily the goal. The goal is I shoot photography for myself. So the very first person who needs to be fulfilled with it is me.
Right. No,
Right?
that's super true. Like make yourself happy. And I tell people that
Yeah.
if you like
Yep.
intentional
Have
movement,
fun with it.
have fun with it.
Yeah.
If you
Make sure you
prefer,
like it.
yeah, make sure you like it. If you like getting down low on the ground, try different things. I mean, the cell phone is just,
Yeah.
you
Shoot
know,
different angles, maybe shoot different aspect ratios. I mean, you don't need a medium format camera because your phone can shoot a square image.
right. Yeah, and
Right?
right, and fall in love and kind of get to know what you get most passionate about before you invest potentially in a full
Yeah.
camera system because there's so many systems out there that, you
Yeah.
know,
I mean, who knows? Maybe down the road you'll discover, oh, I like shooting in square format.
yeah,
Okay, so now, you know, you like shooting square and you want a high quality, then, you could either get a medium format film camera or skip that and get a medium format digital camera that shoots in square format, or get a high resolution mirrorless camera, like a 45, 50, 60 megapixel sensor, so that when you shoot square, you would still retain a sizable amount of resolution for print.
right, right.
But you wouldn't have known that unless you started playing with the phone and shooting in different aspect ratios. Or maybe you like doing panoramas.
Yes.
Who knows, I like panoramas. That's
Oh,
one of
I
the
love,
formats that I really love.
yeah, I
I
love
love shooting panoramas.
panoramas. Those are beautiful.
Yeah. So yeah, and these things you will easier discover when you experiment with your phone.
Right, and get out at different times of day. I think you'll start to realize too, like just the
Yeah.
light, learn how the
Oh,
light,
with regards to that, phones are very good in low light nowadays. If you have a recent model phone, they're very good in low light. I mean, they're still going to be noisy because of the small sensor, but they take far better photos in low light than the older phones.
right?
But just remember, the same principle applies, because people wonder, oh, why is their images blurred? Well, duh, your shutter speed is slow because
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's low light. So the same principle applies whether you use your phone or not. Use a tripod. I mean, I know it's extra work, but if you want your photos to be really good, even with a phone, then the same rule applies.
Right.
The shutter speed is too slow. You're not going to get a good image holding your phone, even if it's, if it has digital stabilization, even if it has
No,
that.
no.
If the shutter speed is like a second or even half a second, you're holding it, or digital stabilization, it ain't gonna cut it.
No, it's not gonna, yeah, it's not gonna cut it. No.
So use a tripod.
Yeah, get a little tripod
Yeah,
that,
or use a selfie stick and have a clamp or something to mount it, to clamp it over something,
right, right.
or have a bag where you can stand it, or something, anything that would stabilize the camera phone, and you will get a better picture in low light. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
So, what are your last tips for anyone who's curious about photography? Not sure.
Just concentrate on just concentrate on your composition, develop the way you see and imagine something, make your photography intentional, don't waste time like some people snapping away, yes, snap away, but experiment, shoot in different aspect ratios, and see what you like, hopefully doing all of these things will enable you to develop a style that's unique to you, and that's what people appreciate, because your photos are going to be different, they're going to stand out. Nowadays, when millions of photos
Gosh.
are being shared out there, it's not a competition, but what people appreciate are phones that are photos that are unique and that they're different, and that's only the result of a person that's developed their own style or their own compositions. Yeah.
Right, right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Noel, for sharing today. And I'm going to put some information in the show notes if people have questions about the different apps to maybe look into for their cell phones. And then, wow, we'll have to have a whole nother discussion about all your different camera models on another day. So,
Definitely. Yeah.
and did you have an Instagram account
I
if
have an
people?
upcoming trip, and sorry, what?
Oh, I said, do you want to share with our viewers and listeners your Instagram account or where they can find your work if they're curious?
Sorry, I lost you.
Do you want to share your Instagram account or website where people can see your photos?
My Instagram account is cousin Cali, CUZINCALI. That's my Instagram account. Um, I don't have a website, but I have a gallery of exhibited images. It's on Pixieset.
Okay,
So Pixieset forward slash the same thing, cousin Cali, CUZINCALI. So that would be Pixieset forward slash cousin Cali.
great. All right. Thank you so much.